I've always been getting a lot of requests for the Dockin D Fine Plus. I've hummed and hawed about it for a long time. Didn't think it quite fitted in, you know, with the speakers I've got. Is it of interest to me? Is it any better than the speakers I've already got? Blow me, along comes Dockin D Fine Plus 2. It's nearly twice the price of the others. It's around £180 at the moment. So that's a lot of money. What was a good value budget JBL Xtreme killer is now it's being priced up there alongside it. Still, it's of interest. I decided to get one. I have to tell you straight up, I can't do all the comparisons and all the testing that I wanted to do in this video because it won't charge. So I've been running the battery down. No point in doing maximum tests and all that and doing comparisons when I don't really know what the charge is. You can only know that it's below 30 or above 30%. All I know is when I put it on charger, charging light kept flashing, and eventually the battery went. So, well, it didn't completely go, but it was below 30%. No point in doing tests at that point. I will say, Dockin support, been brilliant. It's not actually, the company's not called Dockin, it's called some German thing, Stroher or something, but it's a German company that sells the Dockin. I immediately told them the problem, and they say you can have a refund or we'll send you an exchange out straight away, and you can send the one you've got back a bit later. So that's what they've done. I'm waiting for my new one to come. I've still got this one. I'll be sending that one back. I bought this straight from the website. Just let you know, it's not via Amazon. So that customer support is the company support itself. Even the questions I've been asking, they've been really good. So get on with this video. Basically, this is going to be then an overview, a quick look at the speaker, my first opinions on it, and the specs of it. And then future videos, I will be doing comparisons. A bit of a teaser. Look, two of them that I really want to test it against. JBL Xtreme 2. This Motion Soundcore. Well, you're thinking, oh, that's not very fair on the Motion Plus, but these are speakers that I personally use. I'm personally interested in the comparisons. This is probably my most go-to speaker. And yes, it's a lot smaller and a lot cheaper, but still, it's not about the price. For me, the comparison is it going to be a nicer listen? Will this be my go-to? Or is it of no consequence at all? So, about the speaker, quickly. What comes in the box? You do get a USB charging cable. You do get an auxiliary cable. You do get a manual, quite a nice manual actually. It's not some poorly translated Chinese thing that you can't actually understand. It's quite a nice manual in several languages. You also get this cable, which is easy. I say cable, this strap. It's easy to put on and off. It's just a clip, so you can choose whether you want to use it or not. Hassle-free. Hassle-free. Yeah, it is actually easy to put on and off. It's just a clip there. It clips around the side there. Not personally using it myself. So why is this a lot more expensive than the previous, apparently almost identical Dockin D2 Fine Plus? Well, we now have Bluetooth 5. They'd also say, although I don't know what, they appear to be the same drivers, it seems to be the same setup. I asked them if they're the same drivers and they said no. These are new drivers. You do get 2 woofers, 2 tweeters, twin passive radiators on the back. You do get NFC pairing. Also now, which is new, you get 3 modes. You get a clean mode, a bass mode, and the standard mode, which they call balance, and I'll get onto that in a minute. Is about £180, as I said, retail. Other headline specs, well, it's a 50-watt speaker, as it always was. It's a 9,600 milliamp battery. It is aptX, Bluetooth 5. You do get stereo pairing, easy stereo pairing, although I've only got one. Apparently, it's just one button on the top there that you have to use for your pairing. Well, on both of the speakers, obviously. As I said, you got the cable. You do get auxiliary in and out, which is quite novel these days. You can use it as a power bank, so it's got charging out. One thing to note, it's proprietary. I say proprietary, it's a barrel charging port because it charges at 15 volts, not your USB 5 volts. Charges at 2.4 amps, which means it's 36 watts power of charging. It's not particularly light. It's 2.2 kilos. That is heavy, but it is well hand-holdable if you are of medium build with medium hands. Still, it's easier to hold than the JBL Xtreme, which is not, for me, holdable. I'm sure if you've got big hands you could do it. I can't hold that in one hand. It's not submergible. It's IPX5, which means it's splash proof, but it's not like these others where you can submerge them in water. Well, you could drop it in water and it would still be all right. Apparently after 30 minutes, 1.5 meters. Splash proof only on the Dockin D Fine Plus 2. Just to tell you the size of those drivers. The woofers are 64mm, the tweeters are 25mm, and you've got your passive radiators. Maybe one of the nicest features. I don't know if it had it on the old Dockin because I've only got the new one. But you've got a completely removable battery. So there's no, searching YouTube for teardown videos when you want to replace the battery. You've got 6 screws, 6 little screws. You take them out, the battery's there, one clip, out comes the battery. You pop your new battery back in. So that's very handy to have. So what kind of sound to expect? If you've had the older Dockin, you probably already know. I didn't have it. This is all new to me. So I'm measuring the frequency response. Dockin D Fine Plus 2 frequency response. Just to quickly say, this is with psychoacoustic smoothing to approximate what you're actually going to hear. Can't really measure it, strictly speaking, plus or minus 3 decibels, because we have peak about 97.5, we have trough about 86.5, 11 dB range. If we want to be kind, we're going to say peak about 95 dB, which means we could come down to about 89 dB for our measurements, and we actually got the bass going below 50 Hertz. It's impressive in the bass. Basically, this says it's going to be quite bass heavy. This also tells me we've got a dip, about 700 Hertz to 4 kilohertz. I don't know if that's coincidence or not. That happens to be where our ears are most sensitive. So it's not going to be sibilant. It's not going to hurt your ears. It's not going to be overly harsh. Could well be lacking a bit of sparkle. We do have that peak at around 6 kilohertz. That's the presence range. I don't know if that's deliberate or not, but that's where old style treble buttons used to center. So it's countering some of that lack of clarity in the upper mids. It does extend right out to 20 kilohertz. So 10 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz, you're going to get your harmonics. And on paper, we should have very nice upper bass, lower mids around this area. 150, 200 hertz all the way up to about 700 hertz. So lower mids, upper bass, it's quite strong with that big peak at 6 kilohertz. By way of reference, if I overlay the Xtreme 2, approximately around the same sound levels that you would hear, you can see the Xtreme 2 far more bass heavy, lacking in those lower mids compared to the Dockin. Stronger again, upper mids, but falling away rapidly. As soon as you hit the harmonics range, 6 kilohertz and above, going to rob it of some atmosphere, some ambience. If I overlay the Motion Plus, adjust for volume, did record it all at 66%. So approximately, if you was listening, there would be kind of perceived same sound level. Again, looks relatively like the Dockin is going to be quite rich in the lower mids, upper bass. Going to sound very warm, lacking in the upper mids, where the Soundcore Motion Plus starts having a peak, which means going to get some of that clarity. But the Dockin has that big 6 kilohertz peak, trying to add in some clarity that it was missing because of the dip. More bass heavy on the Dockin, probably clearer sounding, but thinner sounding on the Motion Plus. So going by those specs, it's interesting to me because although disappointing, upper mids, bit recessed, it is stronger on paper in the lower mids and upper bass. In fact, the bass does extend nicely. Could be quite a warm speaker. I'm missing something with lush mids. I do like something thick, sludgy, but warm and pleasant, which makes especially old recordings sound quite pleasant. It can cover brittle, bright recordings. I miss a speaker that does that because all these newer speakers are coming in something of a V shape, something of a smiley shape. Yes, you got the bass, yes, you got the highs, you got some clarity, but the warmth in the mids, that sludgy, treacly thing that to my ears I think of, where it's just really nice with, maybe sort of classical, certainly with stuff that I listen to, when it comes to older recordings that weren't particularly great, it does flatter them to a certain extent, which to me is okay. It's not about, oh, it's got to be exactly flat frequency response. It's got to be exactly how it was originally, because of course it never was anything. In reality, original comes down to the mixing. Something I always want to know, how linear are the volume steps? Is it a tricky speaker to get to the right volume? The Dockin D Fine Plus 2 volume steps, as you can see, not very linear. First two steps, very, very quiet. Very, very quiet, with big bass boosts, as you would hope. Step 3, 20% volume, quite a bit louder than the first two steps. This is where you start hearing it. No bass boost at all. In fact, no bass. Step 3, 26%. You start hearing the body of the music. As you can see, now, very linear, till you hit 66%. Then, very small increases in volume as you go up the volume steps, from 66% to 100%. The good news is, no limiting of the bass. Every volume step, apart from 20%, gives you an increase in bass, albeit after 66%, the volume and the bass increases are not great. It's not hitting a hard limit, as you do with a lot of speakers. So yeah, it's a bit weird, something going on there when it comes to the volume steps. Not, you know, there's hardly any change at the top. We get that lot with JBL, but maybe only the last two steps, you know, maybe the last 3 or 4 steps. On the Dockin, not a lot happening. Not going to be a great choice then for very low level night listening, if that's something you wanted to do, because it's very, very quiet. Those first 3 steps till you hit like 26% volume. It's not a great listen. It's a notable step up, 26% and onwards. So I'm then asking myself, okay, does the sound actually change as I go up in the volume? A lot of speakers, the bass changes a hell of a lot, and then you start coming off the high end, and it's a different listen along those volume steps. I wonder if we got that with the Dockin. So looking at how the frequency response changes with volume, and basically it doesn't. Very little change as you got the volume steps. The thing to note, obviously, it's not very linear in its volume steps. 20% is a long way behind 40%, and then it's more linear, 40, 60, 80, 100%. But you notice the bass, compared to the rest of the frequency response, there's very little change. As you'd expect, bass heavy, 20%, not quite as bass heavy as you got the volume steps. Obviously, you need more compensation at lower volumes to match the lower sensitivity of your ears to the bass. Normally, you expect by 100% piercing highs and some upper mids and very little bass. Not so with the Dockin D Fine Plus 2, a consistent listen through the volume range. So I think, you know, from my point of view, I've taken my measurements, I've got a handle on what to expect, but it's never quite the same when you listen. So let's have a listen. 66% volume.
It's in my mind. I'll make it work, I won't give up. I'll take my chances, prove them wrong. People who keep asking for a plan B. No one can handle this fire. Got the blood of a tiger, and I don't care anymore. I'm done with trying to feel worth it. Gotta know that I earned this. I'll get the life I deserve. I'll let it go. Till I live in California.
When it's over, I will be the greatest that you ever seen before, and I'll stay eternal.
You could give it anyone, and I could give it anyone. You're healing me.
Yeah, first impressions for me, quite favourable. For me, it's bass heavy, but it's just towing the right side of the line between just too bass heavy for a nice relaxing listen. So you've got the weight at the bottom, you do have some nice lower mids, there is real body, there's real weight to think, you know, it's a bit too much weight, you know, hi-hats, stuff like that, the timbre sounds, a bit too much weight, but just the right side that is actually quite nice, quite pleasant. A bit flattering, you could say. Do have that missing upper mids, that is a problem. The highs aren't of great quality, it's basically relying on that basically around 6 kilohertz boost. So it's not, the vocals are there, a little bit recessed. It lacks a certain atmosphere, a certain sparkle. So there's a lot to like, but there's also some questions. But at this point, I am liking this speaker. I've been playing it in standard mode. So what are these modes all about? It's quite easy to change the modes. If I turn this on, boom, boom. So it's now connected. We have a blue light to tell me Bluetooth mode. Now this green light all day has been orange. I'm a bit annoyed because it hit orange, which is supposed to mean under 30%. It's now gone green, which is supposed to mean over 30%. Something not right with this battery. It certainly doesn't fully charge. I've had it on over 24 hours charging and it was never fully charged. Certainly told me it was run down and it's now telling me, really frustratingly, I've got over 30%. So obviously unreliable. Now, if I want to change the mode, that's telling me there's no light on. There's a middle LED, but it's not lit. That tells me I'm in standard mode or what they call the balance mode. If I want to go to bass heavy mode, all I've got to do is hold down the minus and the plus till I get, now I've got a red LED. That means it's in bass heavy mode. And then I want to change again. I've now gone to a green middle LED. That tells me I'm in the clean mode. And I want to go back to default mode. Hold it down again. So that's really easy. Changing modes is really easy. But what do they do? 3 modes. The default mode being balance mode. You then get bass mode and a clean mode. A clean mode I thought was probably going to be a bass cut only. The blue line is the clean mode. As you can see, it does cut bass, but it also cuts at all frequencies. So clearly, this is what they say, a cleaner sounding mode. It's doing less probably at the preamp stage. They do say you get more battery time using clean mode. Well, of course, if it doesn't go as loud, it's going to last longer. Bass mode in red is a bass boost. It's also a bit of a cut elsewhere right along the frequency range. It's going to help it sound even more bass heavy relatively. As you got the volume scales, as you can see, the difference between all 3 modes becomes narrower and narrower. By the time you get to maximum volume, there isn't a huge amount in it. However, you do still get more bass with the bass mode. You do get less bass with the clean mode, and you get more along the entire frequency range apart from below 300 Hertz with standard mode. How do they sound?
About that, but you live in my thoughts. I just want to forget you.
So my preference is for the balance mode, but I could quite easily see how someone who's more on the side of an extreme would maybe like the bass mode. It just holds enough that it's not completely changing the sound and making it ridiculously bass heavy and robbing everything else. It's just subtle enough, and the rest of the frequency range, when you're in clean mode or bass mode, it's changing just enough that it changes the sound noticeably, but without altering the overall sound signature. To me, that's been well implemented, even though personally I prefer the balance mode. I was also prefer an app and to be able to even more, fine-tune it myself. But as modes go, we've got them. I think they work quite nicely. I can see some people liking all of those modes in different scenarios. So I would have liked to done maximum volume tests, all sorts of tests, but I can't do it. I don't know what the charge is, so it would be a bit silly doing that. However, just to give you a bit of a teaser and answer my own questions, quick comparison with both against the JBL Xtreme 2, because I'm saying this is bass heavy, but let me, against a proper bass heavy speaker, what's the difference? And then against the little old, world champion for value Soundcore Motion Plus. This is a nice listen. Forget the price. I like the speaker. I like the size. So how does it compare for me? You probably might think it's a silly comparison, that it's not really fair. Look at the size of that speaker compared to this one. But just to answer my own questions, and also because I'm sure most of you have got reference points on these two speakers, it'll help you place where this speaker really sits. A comparison between these three speakers. So I have to say, look, it's not a perfect speaker, and I've only had it a few days, but for me, I'm really happy. Look, £180, yeah, that's a, given that, what we can get at the lower end, on the budget end, it's a lot of money. It's right up there against the extremes and those sort of speakers. So you can no longer say when it's good value, it's a budget speaker. It's properly priced now. So it has to hold its own against these speakers. For me, this does sit somewhere between the Xtreme and the Motion Plus, and that's a good thing. Different recordings, I could use different speakers, and that's what I have been doing. Overly bright, old recordings that need some extra bass weight, I've been using the Dockin. And for most other stuff, especially if it bass heavy recordings, I will use the Motion Plus. It's still got a reasonable amount of bass. The difference is this is great with vocals. It really flatters some vocals. Very, very detailed at the higher end. Whereas the Dockin, I found very, very detailed at the lower end. But, you know, it's quite poor when it comes to vocals. Look, there's a lot worse speakers. Certainly, to me, holds up better than the Xtreme 2 on the high end when it comes to clarity. Does extend all the way out to 20 kilohertz. Yes, you can't hear him, but for a lot of people, yes, but that's the ambience range, that's the harmonics. I think it does. When I hear it against the Xtreme 2, I can hear that difference in ambience. That's just something you can't quite hear what you're listening to, but you know there's something going on. In the same way as some bass you only feel, but you don't hear. But it's part of the overall experience. So I'm not saying this is, oh, £180, that's the best speaker you can get. I'm saying, for me, on first impressions, and I'm going to have to do a lot more testing, it does sit nicely with the other speakers I've got. I have been happily listening to this. While I'm listening, I'm thinking, yeah, I'd certainly like the vocals to be a bit more forward, a bit more body to them. It's a bit thin. You know, that lack of 1 to 4 kilohertz is an issue. Yes, I could get third-party apps and start, you know, boosting that, but that's not something I personally like to do. Never found it really worthwhile. But if you're into your third-party apps, then that's going to sort that out. If they could ever come up with an app, that would sort it out. But my first impression is really, really favourable. I didn't know what to expect because I'm not thinking, is it good value? I'm thinking, does it hold its own? For me, yes. If it was my only speaker, I may have an issue because it's great with certain genres. So it's great to add enough bass weight in the mids, upper bass, and into some deep bass, that there's enough there to enjoy bass heavy tracks, but there's also enough there to flatter poor recordings. But not enough if you are a JBL, a boombox sort of fan. If you want that sort of heavy bass, then probably not quite enough, and you probably have never even thought about the Motion Plus. So I just want to give you a hand on it. My first impressions, I'm disappointed I can't do all the testing I want. That's going to be down the line when I get my other speaker. But in terms of how it sits with my other speakers, definitely has a place. Definitely have enjoyed listening, although it does have definite issues and faults. It's not a perfect speaker. Hope you got something out of my first impressions tonight. Thank you for watching.
UK